Hello, you guys. My name is Josh, and I'm going to be talking to you guys about the differences between bebop, cool jazz, and hard bop. So let's start off talking about bebop, which was made around 1945 to 1950. This was an underground movement which was largely developed through jam sessions. So jam sessions were un unrehearsed gatherings between musicians where they would just jam out. They were the first to say that they were artists and not entertainers, and this was largely reflected in their music. So before I talk about the musical characteristics, let me tell you that Duke Ellington actually said that playing bebop is like playing Scrabble with all the vowels missing. That's because playing bebop was very complicated. They had an emphasis on fast tempos, extended harmonies and dissonances, which were complicated extended harmonies, and unpredictable rhythms. So people would try to dance to bebop, but it would be funny because you wouldn't know how to dance to it because certain drums would hit in certain would hit certain areas that you wouldn't expect. So that was a little funny. Um, they also had a very big emphasis on improvisation. So the chord progressions were the same and the melodies were the same, but they were used as introductions and conclusions to the solos rather than the melodies actually being the main part of the song. This bebop was made by saxophonist Charlie Parker or Bird and the trumpeter Dizzy Gillespie. So in response to bebop actually came cool jazz. So cool jazz started around 1950 to 1955, and this was a reaction. Like I said, it was a reaction to bebop, and they also considered themselves as artists rather than entertainers. So while bebop was considered hot, cool jazz was actually considered cool. So where bebop was fast, complex, and unpredictable, cool jazz was more light and relaxed. They had less of an emphasis on rhythm as well. Um, Unlike the other places, they didn't really have too much of a African American influence. So they had less of an influence from blues and gospel, and actually was associated more with West Coast jazz, which was also considered light and relaxed. So cool jazz was post World War II. So post World War II, people were looking for a type of emotional self control, and cool jazz was able to. The cool jazz music was actually able to reflect that. So this was started by trumpeter Miles Davis and Bill Evans when they formed a group, and it started off commercially unsuccessful. But cool jazz would actually be the mainstream part of jazz. And then while cool jazz was a response to bebop, hard bop was actually a response to cool jazz. So hard bop was around 1955 to 1960, and they had a hard groove, incorporate shuffle, and also straight eight rhythms, and pulled from concurrent rock and R&B and soul. So they were predominantly black, and that's the reason why they had such an influence from those genres. They opposed the light and relaxed tone that the cool jazz had, and also had the strong grooves and in the backings. So there were two types of hard bop, and that is funky jazz and mainstream. Funky jazz actually has more simple chords and simple things, but it was more groovy and also pulled from also pulled from blues and gospel genre. The mainstream hard bop had just more complex harmonies, basically. They still had an influence from bebop, as you saw, it's called hard bop. They had the aggressive soloists and the bright tones, and then yeah, that's about it. So bebop was the first, and then cool jazz came right after as a response to bebop and opposed it, and then a hard bop reacted to cool jazz and pulled from bebop and just added more to it. So there you go. Those are the differences between bebop, cool jazz, and hard bop.